Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar on how APIs free your data and unlock value. My name is Anne-Marie Bond, and I'm a Senior Manager of Product Marketing for Software AG. And with me today, I have Shemek Kulik, our Director of Product Management for API Management. And today we want to talk to you about some of the key things to consider when you're building innovative solutions with APIs, as many of our customers have done. And Shemek is going to give us a live demo of API management. Now, if you don't know Software AG, we're a leader in the digital world. More than 50% of the Fortune 100 companies use our products to solve really difficult problems. And some of the names that our customers are customers like Coca-Cola, 7-Eleven, 8 of the top 10 US banks use Software AG, and not just for bank transactions, but for online payments and credit card transactions. Actually, if you've ever flown in the US, driven a car, taken a train, you've probably used Software AG. And if you've ever downloaded music or had a coffee on the way to work, then you also use Software AG. And when it comes to API management, we're ranked as one of only 3 leaders in the most recent Forrester Wave for API management solutions. And we're really thrilled with some of the comments that Forrester made, in particular, when they spoke about our vision for the future of API management, recognizing the need for dynamic ecosystems and how our product enhancement plans show that. And of course, our commitment to our customers' success. This is part of the DNA of Software AG. So what is API management? API management is about frictionless business. I'd like to take credit for this comment, but it actually came from one of our customers. The Atlanta Hawks are an API customer of Software AG's, and they use APIs to power their mobile apps and provide frictionless access to data. And this enables the Hawks, in turn, to provide an amazing fan experience for people that are coming to their stadium. What they do is they've created a customer app that their customers load onto their phones, and it allows them to do things like purchasing tickets, obtaining special services, getting admission to party rooms, purchasing food and drink. And the Hawks in turn collect data that allows them to recognize those fans the minute they connect to Wi-Fi in the stadium, as soon as they come in. The Hawks know all of their preferences and status. They know everything about that fan. And so they can do things like when you actually enter the stadium on your birthday, you'll get a text from the Hawks that says, "Happy birthday, come to a party room. We have a birthday cake ready for you." Now that is amazing customer service. But why are APIs such a hot topic? Well, they're nothing new. They've been around for many years, and in the past they were considered something that was sort of backroom IT developer level. But they're increasingly important because of mobile and the cloud. So enterprises own huge amounts of valuable data, and this data has the potential to be used to build new capabilities that can boost revenues or reduce costs or help build new and smarter ways of doing business. And at the same time, customers who have tons of these easy-to-use apps on their mobile phones already expect those services to be available. They expect them to be personalized. They expect them to be tailored. They expect them to be available 24/7. But a lot of that data is stuck inside isolated applications within the enterprise. Now, APIs can help unlock the value by making the data and functions available for broader use. You can expose it to developers, both internal and external, so they can build new and innovative products that generate new revenue for your business via new sales channels. APIs are a way of standardizing that interface between the end user, the developer, and the back-end provider of data. And so it allows you to accelerate the development of these new capabilities. Now, what's API management? API management is the set of tools you need to be able to publish, promote, and secure your APIs to build that ecosystem of developers and partners. And here you can see on the page we have some of the key elements of an API management program. We have the API portal, which is where developers come to find APIs that they're interested in. We have the API gateway, which is where the end users will actually consume that API. And this is where you would apply the security. This is where you would apply policies to manage how those end users consume your APIs. And this is where you would mediate and collect information on how they're doing that. And of course, we have policy management and analytics, which allows you to govern the lifecycle of your APIs. So APIs are no longer something for the back office. They're now something that the front office cares about because they're the basis for a digital strategy. You can have a new digital strategy that creates new ways of doing business. When the Atlanta Hawks used APIs to enable their fans to enjoy a highly customized experience, they created a new way of doing business with their fans. In fact, with the Atlanta Hawks API program, their application, you could actually go to the stadium and not attend a basketball game. You can just enjoy the party rooms, you can purchase food and drink, you can enjoy special services. That's a new way of attending a game. You can also become easier to do business with. Some of our customers like Dur, and especially the Atomos partnership in EMEA, are now interacting via APIs. You can leverage your unique data and services. Transportation customers that we work with who are selling coach services, for example, are able to create ticketing APIs that they use on travel websites so that they can sell their tickets not just on their own websites, but on aggregator websites like Travelocity and Expedia. But this transportation customer is not only selling their own tickets, they've now provided this ticketing API solution to other travel providers. So they've created a new line of business. You can also use APIs to support digital transformation initiatives. The UK Army, one of our API customers, provides secure and reliable access to defense services and a real-time view on Army assets, people, and information while they're controlling who and what can be accessed. They use a multi-layer security approach that's implemented across multiple zones using our webMethods API gateway and portal. The UK Army started out with a single API. That single API enabled them to save an estimated $8 billion a year, which is why they're rolling out this comprehensive enterprise-level API management initiative. But how do API programs generate value? Well, I've been talking about value indirectly, and the value is indirect. It's called the API economy, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you charge for each API that's consumed. A published API starts with the API provider, and the API provider might be creating something like a mapping API, for example. You can find those everywhere: Google Maps, Bing Maps, Mapbox, Foursquare. They publish this API and make it available on an API portal. And then developers who are looking to build applications start searching for a mapping API. They might come to your portal and find your mapping API. They investigate how it's put together, what it can do, determine whether they can pull it into their app. And when they pull it into their app and publish their app users will be consuming your API every time they use the app. And the value comes from those app users, whether it's in the form of visibility. Maybe your organization's name is attached to that API, so then when they need additional mapping capabilities, they know to go to your organization. That value can also come in the form of frictionless interactions with your partners, so creating easier ways to do business, so you're a more desirable business partner. Or the value can come in the form of customer satisfaction. Self-service and access to your own data is really critical for customers these days. They don't want to come into a bank to do something with their account. They want to be able to have that on their phone remotely. They don't want to be able to, they don't want to have to call somebody in support to change their address. They want to be able to log on and do that through a mobile app or something on the web. So creating customer satisfaction encourages your customers to stay with you. But companies realize that APIs are business assets. And in order to achieve this indirect value, you have to have a strategy to ensure that you're building the right APIs at the right time. And you need to plan what your customer's doing. You need to understand what your customer's doing, so you're building an API that's valuable to them. So we start with doing something like defining the challenges, the pain that our customers are experiencing every day. And in a true API management program, you would start doing that with a tool, maybe something like our tool Alphabet. And then you identify the resources that you have available to create those APIs. Again, there are tools to do this. We use something called Eris. And then you would design your APIs in a design tool and prototype them and promote them to your portal so that you can get feedback from other developers who might be consuming them. Getting feedback ensures that you're building APIs that developers will be interested in consuming. You develop those APIs, maybe on an integration platform, you convert them to APIs, you use some kind of automation tools to ensure that you can repeatedly promote them to production seamlessly and without any bugs. You would use an API gateway to apply policies to control access and to ensure that your APIs are being accessed at a level that you're comfortable providing. And then you would use analytics to measure and analyze how those APIs are actually being used so you can ensure that your customers are getting what they need. So this API management lifecycle, the importance of this really comes back to customer stickiness. One of our customers, the largest electricity company in the world actually, was an early API customer for mobile apps, and they use this end-to-end API lifecycle, including registry and governance with Centrosite. And what they said to us is, by understanding their customer's journey and really prototyping what their customers might want and paying attention to the feedback they're getting from their customers, they're ensuring that customers don't just consume their APIs once. They come back over and over again. Customer stickiness is the challenge that you're trying to overcome here. But how you deliver your APIs is just as important. And if you want to deliver your APIs in the cloud, you need a platform that runs in a distributed architecture because the cloud is highly distributed. And microservices are designed for the cloud. APIs and microservices can work together to deliver a scalable platform where each API can scale independently and have its own delivery lifecycle. And that way you can ensure that if you have an API that is consumed by, 5,000 users, that it has multiple microservices underneath it that can handle that scale. Whereas an API that's only consumed by 2 users, maybe a partner who only contacts you once a week, who doesn't need multiple microservices runtimes, will have a much smaller scale solution. And that's what this image is about, how microservices and APIs work together. You have these applications that you're trying to build, and your data is all trapped in systems of record at the bottom. And in order to make this architecture scalable, you create these layers. The integration layer can reach into the applications and use out-of-the-box connectors to create system APIs. Your ERM systems, your CRM systems, even your SaaS applications, because SaaS applications also might need to be integrated to provide the kind of data that you need for your API solution. Then you have a microservices layer. And that microservices layer consumes the system APIs, but that's where you're going to provide the experience APIs, the public APIs, and the application APIs that you're exposing to the world. Using microservices to implement those APIs enables scalability, agility, and resilience in the cloud, because our microservices runtime contains a number of capabilities that allow your Docker containers and IP addresses that change to be recovered automatically so that there's no interruption in service to your end user. And then that microservices layer is the source of the APIs that you're publishing. You publish them through an API gateway or a micro gateway. And the API gateway is where you apply policies for security. It's where you apply policies that might throttle access. It's how you track what your consumers are doing so that you can analyze what's happening later on. And we offer both an API gateway and a micro gateway. The micro gateway is designed to work in a microservices architecture. The policy enforcement point for the micro gateway sits right next to your microservice, and you deploy them one for one. And that micro gateway can then federate back to the API gateway for centralized management. But APIs don't function in isolation, so let's go back to the big picture. In order to free your data that's locked into your on-premises systems or in your siloed SaaS applications, of course you have to have an integration solution, and I think a lot of people take that for granted. But it's really critical to have an integration solution that has all the pre-built connectors you need, so it's super easy to compose your services from existing services and data sources. You really can't have APIs without integration. But one of the newer trends in APIs today is using them to integrate with partners. So historically, B2B interactions have been handled through complex standards like EDI, or through low-level interactions like sending files via FTP, which is a simple way to handle it, but it's error-prone and it's often insecure. So some of our customers are moving away from this and looking at APIs as a way to interact with their partners. And once these pillars are in place, once you have your integration platform and your B2B platform, then you can really build on that API program to expose your services and data, both internal and external, and work with your partners to create seamless and really frictionless interactions. Now let's take a look at our main API management platform. We have three main components. The first one is our API portal, and that's where you publish their APIs and where you engage and provide support for both your internal and your external developers. And Shemek's going to show us how to do that today. You want your external developers to use your APIs. So anything you can do to create more interaction, whether it's feedback loops or additional information about how to use your API, or allowing developers to see how your API is being used by other people, see how popular it is. That's the purpose of the API portal. The API gateway has everything you need to protect the access to those APIs and also to monetize their usage. You need to make sure that only authorized clients can gain access to your data, and in some cases, if you want to make money, you need to know exactly how they're being consumed, how frequently they're being consumed, and what your users are doing with them. And the micro gateway is what enables you to function in a microservices architecture. This API management platform is available on premises, it's available in the cloud, and it's available in hybrid mode. So now let's dive a level deeper. I'm going to hand it over to Shemek, who's going to talk to us about how you can experience this frictionless API management. He's going to show you in this demo session how to take a look at an API provider who's going to create and expose an API. He's going to publish the API. He's going to apply policies for security, and then we'll see how it's actually being used. Shemek, let me hand it over to you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Yes, we're going to look on our API management platform from the perspective of two different personas, the most important personas in API management. One is the API provider or API product manager, and the other one is the API consumer or user or developer, if you will. For this, I'm going to use our API management in the cloud, as I'm already logged in to my own account in my cloud, and I have a couple of solutions available. We're going to start with API Gateway as the API provider. So what I need to do first in API Gateway for our demo, and if I would be starting creating my digital products, my APIs, would be to design and document an API. Here we're starting with a clean slate, so the list is empty. So I'm going to use the option to create an API, which allows me to do this in a number of ways. I can import an API from a file by providing an appropriate descriptor. I can create it from scratch, or I can import it from a URL, which is something that I would do. So I would provide a URL that will serve as a Swagger document for a test API. Other options here are, the newer version of Swagger, which is OpenAPI version 3. It can be also RAML for REST APIs, for SOAP APIs. We can use WSDL, and we can also import our OData API using the OData metadata document or service definition document. So we have an REST API here. When I click create, API Gateway is going to reach out to this URL, read this descriptor document, and create an API for us with all the details that come from the descriptor. Once that's ready, we are presented with API details that is divided across these multiple tabs. We're not going to go through all of them today, but I'm going to show you some important aspects of the API. So we start with API details tab with basic information that came from this descriptor that we have loaded. So we know it's a Swagger Pet Store API with some version, the owner, that is me because I have imported it. It's not yet active, it's in maturity state beta, and so on and so forth. And then we have also all the information about what this API provides in terms of resources and methods. So before we actually go ahead and publish this to the portal, as an API provider, I might want to do something more. So just to keep it simple for today, I'm going to edit this API and change a few things so that you can get an understanding what we can do here in API Gateway. So maybe I'll just change the maturity state to test, and I'll assign this API to sales and ordering group. I may tag it as well so that people can find it later on. I could change the description here, add something more. I can continue with adding additional information on lower levels in the API as well. So for example, the store inventory resource, I might want to target as a store. I could continue with adding additional documentation here in the form of files that I could attach, and these files can be really anything that you want. This could be a text document, a PDF, Word, or whatever document specifying, some additional information that you want to convey to API users, maybe how to use it, maybe what are the special considerations. But these files could be even, sample code to use this API, or any other information that you feel would be useful to share with your users. So once you're ready with this, you can save it, or you can continue with changing additional things. So we can see that we have changed the maturity state and we added some grouping, but let's do one more thing. We'll switch to the policies tab, which is the place where API providers define what's going to happen if an API consumer makes a call to this API. So here in the center, we have this infographic that shows us an API call being made. It originates here with the API client depicted with this phone icon. It goes down the blue line to the actual API backend, to the implementation of the business logic we're calling. When this backend responds, the response is being sent up the green line to the calling client. And along these lines, you can see multiple stages in which policy enforcement, runtime policy enforcement will be happening. So you might have noticed that when I click on one particular stage, on the left side of the screen, the policy catalog focuses on this specific stage, showing me what are the possible policy actions that I can choose from and enforce in this stage that I have chosen. If I click on the left-hand side here, is also going to change the focus on the infographic for me. So let's go ahead and add a simple policy. I'm going to edit the API again and allow the policy to do a simple security. So I'm clicking on Identify and Authorize Application, Policy Action, and I'm going to choose API Key to require API keys when someone calls the API. Later on, to see that something is actually happening, I'm also going to go to the traffic monitoring stage, and I'm going to make sure that the API calls are being logged to API Gateway and to API Portal, and maybe I want to be able to see in the logs later on what was the request and the response sent to the client. So when I'm happy with this, I save it, and my API would be ready to be published. There's some things that's changed in the screen, so you can see that we have number 1 here saying that this policy is enforced in this stage. There's number 1 here, so we're making sure that the API provider will find this screen as easy as possible for them to work with the API. So when we are ready with our APIs, they will be presented in this screen here, listed with the indication what is the type of the API, its name, basic description, the version, and some action buttons here. So we want to publish this API to API Portal. So first, I need to activate it, because before I activate the API, no one will be able to call it. Even if someone knows that this API exists in the API Gateway will reject calls because it's not active. So first thing is to make sure that we activate our API. Then we can publish it to our API Portal. And when publishing to API Portal, we have a couple of decisions to make. So first, we can decide which API endpoints we're going to make available to the public. In this case, we have only one, because that was the simple API that we imported. But in case your API has multiple endpoints, exposes multiple endpoints, you can make a decision here which ones you want to expose to the public. The other thing we can decide on is to which community in the API Portal we're going to publish the API. The default one is always the public community, which is available to everybody, even the non-registered API Portal users, guests who come without being registered first. But we can also decide to publish this to private communities if we want, right? It's our decision as an API provider. So I'm going to keep the defaults here. I'm just going to publish the API to the API Portal. What the API Gateway is doing right now is taking all these things that we have defined, the API definition with additional things we have specified, the runtime policies that we define that we want API Gateway to enforce, and it makes sure that all this information is sent to the API Portal, so that when someone looks at the API in the API Portal, they will know what the gateway will be doing when they start calling it. On the successful publish, we're getting a message that it was published successfully. You might have noticed that this little icon changed its shape. It's not the upward, facing our arrow only. It's actually have this, 2 arrows right now saying that, well, we know this API has been already published to the portal, and in case you need it, you can republish it, or you can unpublish it. But we're not going to do this right now. So from our API gateway that we are in right now, we can choose from the user menu here to go to API portal, which I already have open here. So I will not. I'm going to go to API Gallery, which was empty before we started. Right now, it has our Petstore API, saying it's a REST API. As you can see, it's being listed in the sales and ordering group. It's been assigned as test. That's what we changed from beta to test. If I had more APIs here, I could, change the grouping to say, okay, show me APIs grouped by maturity status, which basically change the header of the group, saying us, okay, we see this guy in a test group. We are still an API provider. So as an API provider, I publish this to the API portal, and I want to, take a look, do some last checks to see how does it look like in the API portal before I expose it to my users. So I can see, okay, it has a name of the Swagger pet store. We can, edit this name from here if we want to. Let's just simply say, pet store, for example. We can beautify the way how we document the API in the API portal. So I could maybe here in the documentation, I could paste some, info using the markdown syntax so that, the API documentation is more appealing. I mean, you can argue whether this picture is more appealing to users or not, but I'm just showing off the capabilities, right? So after you publish the API from API Gateway to API Portal, you can still make edits to make sure that the documentation is as comprehensive and as exhaustive as possible for your consumers. Of course, all the things that we have published are available. So if someone is interested in learning the store inventory, they will find this resource here, and they will see the tag that we have created. And again, I can provide some additional description documentation for them. They will see that this API responds to a GET call, that it will be providing responses in this particular format. So all the technical documentation is also available here, and nothing is missing. So I'm a provider here, so I could do more. I could, for example, I could just use the latest posts space here to say, hey guys, hope you like the API. Let us know what I'm sorry, it's really hard to type when I talk. What do you think, right? And I can target like testing. Portal is going to hint me, or feedback, right? There's a full discussion forum functionality in the portal that you may use as an API provider to contact your consumers, right? Your consumers, when they come back, they will be able to follow this API, which will subscribe them to any updates to these APIs when you do this. They will be able to rate it as well. Download the client SDK to kickstart their projects. We offer like around 50 different programming languages that you can download the client SDK for. And they will be able to get the access token. When getting an access token, I need to give my, a name for the application that it will be using this API. So I'm going to use the name of, let's say, demo app. I can provide description. For some cases, I might need to provide the redirection URI. For this, I'll just simply provide the name. And what API Portal does right now is contacting the API Gateway to say, hey, we have a user who is interested in using this API. Can you give him access? And depending on the configuration and the API Gateway, the access might require approval or not. In this particular case, there's no approval configured, so I should be getting my access tokens very soon. So if I would switch to a place in API Portal where I can view my registered applications, I will see my demo app created, which will list all the access tokens that I might ever need to call APIs. So I will have an API key. I will have OAuth credentials if I need to use it with APIs protected with OAuth. And I will see which APIs I have associated with this API. So I have this PetStore API associated. So I can click on this right now to show you one more thing that an API user, API consumer can do. So if we go ahead and try the API, API Portal is going to render a screen for us to actually test the API live. So you see that on the left side, we have a listing of all the resources with all the methods that are supported for them. And I could make an API call because the screen renders for me everything that I need to do. So we see that we'll be making a call to store inventory API that runs on our gateway. So if I click the test button, API Portal is actually going to invoke the API and provide me with a response. And that is all thanks to the fact that I have registered my demo application. It was automatically pre-selected for me and gave me the API key that comes from this application. Right? If I would, delete this API key or provide a wrong value and try to test it, you can see that API Gateway is actually validating it because it tells me that you're not authorized because you did not provide a valid token, so I'm not allowing you to use this API. So that shows you how an API consumer can interact with our API portal. They can come, they can find an API, learn about it, get access token by registering their application, and then they can try it out from the portal. And later on, then of course, can generate client SDK to kickstart their project to build an application that will start using this API. Lastly, when we switch back to API Gateway, and here I'm again the API provider, I can go to my PetStore API, and I can switch to the analytics tab to understand what has been happening to my API in runtime. Has anybody been calling it or trying it out? So there's plenty of different dashboards here, but I just wanted to show you that we did 2 calls. Right, the one call that I made was successful, and the other one that I showed you was unsuccessful one because I deleted the token. And all of this has been logged in our API gateway because that's what we wanted. You can see that we had 200 response and 401 response. So as an API provider, I will also be able to understand what has been going on with my API. And that is a very important thing for someone in the API provider or API product manager persona to understand how the APIs are behaving. Are they being used at all? Because I will be interested in this to make my decisions about the API future. How do I progress it? Do I continue with this, or maybe do I phase it out? So we have seen how the 2 different personas work with our API management, the API provider and the API consumer. I hope you liked it. If you do, please make sure to come to our softwareag.cloud website and register for a free trial. With that, I hand it over back to you, Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Shemek. That was a wonderful demo. And by the way, I love the bulldog picture. I thought it was really cute. But what I really enjoyed was how seamlessly you were able to show the relationship between the portal and the gateway, how easy it was for a consumer to come in and do things like, register to use an API and request a key, and then have that automatically be reflected in how the gateway behaves. I mean, I think that seamless interaction is one of the real differentiators here for the UI of our API solution. But what makes our platform unique? Speaking of differentiators, I think the first thing is our support for the full API lifecycle. Everything from being able to model your customers' needs and issues at the very start of determining what kind of API you want to build, to being able to publish a mock version of your API and get feedback from other developers before you actually put code behind it, to being able to monitor. We saw at the end of the demo how we could see exactly how this API was being consumed and used. So you can feed that into the next version of your API and make sure that you get that customer stickiness from creation to retirement. The second unique thing is our microservices capability. Microservices-backed APIs give you the ability to scale in a cloud environment. And the micro gateway, which deploys one-for-one with your microservices, enables you to have that policy enforcement point right next to your microservice. So you can start quickly, you can scale on demand. And finally, our unified API and integration platform. When we looked at that picture of APIs, integration, and B2B, you can see that these things are really very closely tied together, right? You have to have integration in order to create APIs and expose that data, free that data from those back-end systems and from those SaaS applications. And the fact that you can unify that with your B2B platforms so that you can use APIs also to interact with your partners makes it a really powerful solution. And we're happy to say that we're ranked a leader in both API management and hybrid integration. And by the way, we're ranked a leader in the B2B Forrester Wave as well. So what can you do? Well, first of all, you can go to the website, you can download that Forrester Wave and read the comments for yourself. Second of all, you can try the software. Go to our cloud, softwareag.cloud website and download the API management platform. Try it out for 30 days. Let us know if you have any questions. And finally, you can always contact us. You can contact myself, Anne-Marie Bond, or you can contact Shemek, and we're happy to answer your questions and help you understand more about API management at Software AG. Thank you so much for coming to this webinar, and have a great day. Bye-bye.